by saying no, 6 days is what it had to be because that's what the Bible says, and I'm going to ignore the rest of science as a result of that. Yes.
Only because they do lack science.
Yeah, they didn't think scientifically whatsoever. It wasn't. We do all the time.
They had no scientific method.
There was nothing like that. Yeah, there was this. So in describing the world in this cosmological way and describing how it's created, or how it's ordered, they weren't worried about whether it was necessarily factually true, because that was a concept that wasn't necessarily part of their thinking. So the cosmos and chaos, and on the back side of your handout. Well, first of all, no, not yet. I'm sorry, I went too fast. This idea of creating order out of chaos becomes a fairly common biblical theme, and it shows up in lots of different places. Obviously it shows up in Genesis 1:2, where the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So there's formlessness without form, there's void, nothing there, and darkness. Those are words that are describing the chaos that existed. Now, did God somehow create the chaos before Genesis 1, or is the chaos co-eternal with God, and that it's always existed? Those are questions that they would have never asked, and would be highly speculative for us to ask. But it does raise those questions of, could it be possible that there was always chaos at some point, and God existed alongside chaos? We don't know. But that's the way it's described, because that's the starting point, is this chaos. And you see it in various other places throughout the Old Testament. Psalm 104, you set the earth on its foundation so that it shall never be shaken. You cover it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they flee, at the sound of your thunder they take to flight. So there's these chaotic things, waters and other things, and God orders them to be put into order, if you will. Can you see that?
Fairly.
Okay. I'm trying to be creative here. This is a picture of the Leviathan, which is a mythical creature. And in Psalm 74, you divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the dragons in the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan, and you gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. And so here these chaotic beings and elements, the dragons and the Leviathan and the waters are this chaotic mess, and God brings them into order. From Isaiah 51, awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake, as in the days of old. This is actually an appeal to God to bring order back. The generations of long ago. Was it not you who cut Rahab, another mythical dragon creature that showed up in the Babylonian and the Sumerian and the Egyptian cosmologies, who pierced the dragon? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to cross over? So in Isaiah, this is Isaiah being at pretty much the same time as the Babylonian captivity, is appealing to this God who brought things together and brought order. And then from Job, by his power he stilled the sea. By his understanding he struck down Rahab. By his wind the heavens were made fair. His hands pierced the fleeing serpent. So these chaotic elements that seem to be existing, if you will, God in doing creation stills the water, controls the water, strikes down the chaotic monsters that might be out there, and makes it, and so that's what's happening. Order out of chaos, and it shows up. So that's kind of overall the biblical, Old Testament view of what creation was about, is bringing about this order.
So you started to say it shows up in each book or each writer?
Well, these are just, what I'm saying is these are just some of the other that, some of the other books in the Bible, Isaiah and Psalms and Job, have, they incorporate some of these same kind of themes about what God's creative activity was about, bringing order out of the chaos. So there's this poetic imagery of that shows up in the other cosmology. But in the other cosmologies, Babylonian stuff, Rahab is a god. The Leviathan is a god. The water is a god. The darkness is a god. And in those, there's these huge battles between the gods. There's and eventually the god of light wins over the god of darkness, or Marduk defeats Tiamat. There's these huge battles between the gods. In Genesis, in the creation story, in the Jewish story, God just brings these elements under control. They're not divine in any way. He just brings them under control and puts them in their place, if you will. JJ.
I was just wondering, because I think Job's like one of the older books of the Old Testament. Like, is it some of these books written by some of the same priestly era people, do you think?
Well, we don't know when Job was written. That's one of the interesting things about Job. But Isaiah would have been written at the same time as the priestly writers.
Okay.
The Psalms, they're all over the place. Go clear back to David and some of them go clear up to the Maccabean period. So it's hard to say. But the idea of this, because these cosmologies had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, to these with all these gods and stuff. So this theme of order and creation. And what's interesting is there are these words that show up. The word for deep is tehom, which many scholars feel is a sort of a connection to Tiamat in the Babylonian story. So there's these kind of, again, this borrowing of words and stuff from other stories, but not just to copy them, but to make a profoundly different point.
Question.
Yes?
Now, we see the serpent here when God is putting order and chaos.
Right.
Now, in Genesis, there's another serpent that after God creates.
And that's going to be a different story.
But the serpent's always...
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, in this, the serpent, because that's the next week's story, which is a different story, a creation story, and we'll look at how they compare. But that serpent is actually considered to be very wise. So it's not. In some ways, these are appealing to these monsters that they think are fear out in the ocean. Sailors have to beware. So the important thing here is that as we get to the end of this first story of creation, all of these gods end up just being regular creatures. And God doesn't destroy the darkness and the dragons. He just puts them in their place. And so they turn out to not be gods at all. They're just part of creation, part of the natural order. Here's from Psalm 104, that same psalm we saw. There's this idea that Leviathan is now just a creature that swims out in the ocean. It isn't chaos. Yonder is the sea, great and wide. Creeping things innumerable are there. Living things both small and great. There go the ships in Leviathan that you formed to sport in it. So there's this idea that now Leviathan is just a creature. But this, okay. So this is a story of a picture of God creating the world, and from Isaiah, making this declaration of who God is. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Beside me there is no God. I arm you, though you do not know me, so that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is no one beside me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form light and create darkness. I make a weal and I create woe. I, the Lord, do all these things. There's only one God, and that's the point. So how does this? So here's how the writers basically say that in this first chapter of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the world. and there was this void, and there was this darkness. And now you can turn to that thing on the last page of your notes, and there's that little chart there. And if you look on the last page, yeah. If you look on the left side, those are three forms of and then where's mine? Three forms of the chaos: darkness and watery abyss and formless earth. And what happens is that there seems to be this pattern of first God prepares the world to then be populated. And so there's this sort of poetic symmetry. And so first of all, the darkness is taken care of, preparing the world by creating light and separating the light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some slides that correspond to this. But the pictures that are behind them are an interesting collection of pictures, drawings by Escher, who called the 6 Days of Creation. And so these are his renderings of the days of creation. And so on day one, a day of preparation, God creates light, making it daytime, and separates it from the darkness, nighttime. Again, notice that the darkness isn't destroyed or defeated. It's not a rival God. It just needs to be put into order. So the first day is a day of preparation to address the issue of darkness, one of the chaotic elements. The second day of preparation is to create the firmament. What's the firmament?
Terra firma.
It's the heavens.
Oh.
So remember what I said before when Marduk defeated Tiamat and sliced her in half and then put half of her below and half of her above the dome? Mm-hmm. That's the firmament. So in that ancient cosmology, there really was this idea that the dome of the sky was the limit, and that it was a hard dome, and that there would be water on the other side of it that the dome was keeping out. And so when it rained, there were leaks. And no, I don't know. But the firmament actually was referring to that dome, and so God separates the waters above and the waters below. Again, that's an active preparation in controlling this watery abyss of chaos by putting water in its proper place. The third day of preparation is separation of the earth from the water. The earth, Genesis 1 says, formless, void, or without form. Well, here now God brings the land into order, makes there's shorelines, now the water is put in place, and so now everything is brought into order, and the land and the water are in their proper places. Without the land, the water just goes everywhere. Land without boundaries is just a pile of dirt. So day 3 is a day of preparation of separating, and then God anticipates the fact that there's going to be population, so God creates the vegetation on day 3. I don't know what that says about whether vegetation no, never mind. It doesn't.
That was going to be a joke. It was supposed to be a joke.
But it seems like vegetation is different than animals. Okay. So now we go back to day 4, and it goes back to the beginning of the darkness that now has been brought into control by creating light and the day and the night being separated. Now God populates the light and the dark with the creation of the sun, moon, and stars. And so now these things are brought into the created order by, that's how he populates it with sun, moon, and stars. Again, what's interesting is stars were not the what we know them to be today. They were
Ceiling lights.
They were ceiling lights. Yeah, there you go. they were lights on the top on the dome. And in some way, in many cosmologies, those were divine beings. Those pins of light that they saw up there. Day 5. Another day of population relates to the water and the sky now, because now the waters are separated, and so there's sky in between the waters and above the dome. So God creates birds and fish to populate those parts of the created order. And then day 6 is another day of population where, and to address the formless earth idea, so the earth is now put in order, and now it's populated, the earth, with animals and humans. And so that's how the world sort of comes to be. I'm going to end up here in just a second. That's how the world comes to be in this cosmology. And so there's the words, in the last line on your thing there, without form and void, the preparation kind of addresses the formlessness by bringing it all into form. And the days 4 through 6, the population days, fills the void, if you will. So that's kind of how a way of thinking about how the priestly writers formulated this to be able to say that it is God who created this. So we have this incredible statement from Isaiah 40 that is basically a proclamation, not just to the Jewish people, but to anybody, the whole world, all these other different belief systems that were out there. This is their declaration. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, and closed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or as his counselor has instructed him? Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain, and who spreads them like a tent to live in, who brings princes to naught, and makes the rulers of the earth as nothing. That is Israel's audacious claim for who the God of Israel is, as opposed to all those other gods that were running around out there. That is how P's story of creation brings order to the universe, and puts chaos in its place, and proclaims that it is only God who exists, and everything else is created. It is just nature. Next week, we're going to look at the second story of creation, and we're going to see look at the differences between that story and this story, and how they balance each other out, like some yin and yang, and some masculine and feminine, and some other kinds of ways that these stories kind of balance each other out, which is probably why they were both included together, even though they seem to contradict each other.
Is this the first one chronologically?
Huh?
Is this story?
Yeah.
This is chronologically.
This is the first one, yes. So thank you very much. That's off to our next session. Thank you. And of course, I was going to have lots and lots of time.